Trumps in American Politics, 1776 to 1963, and Survival of the Richest, Donald Jeffries separates the real from the unreal. Fact from fiction. Fact from fiction. Reverse engineering our manufactured reality. And now, from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., this is I Protest with Donald Jeffries.
And welcome to I Protest. This is Donald Jeffries coming to you from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as we do every Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, as the man says. Lots to talk about. We are living in interesting times, regardless of how you look at it. At the very least, this is great theater. Returning guest today, a guy I admire very much, Jack Cashel. He's an independent writer and producer. He's written 17 books. I have 10, but I pale in comparison to this guy. He's appeared on C-SPAN Book TV a dozen times, which is a dozen more than I have. They won't have me. He's also produced a score of feature-length documentaries. He has a PhD from Purdue University in American Studies. We'll be talking about he's written some books on Obama. He's written a book on white flight, which we talked about, and a great book recently on Ashley Babbitt. So we'll talk about all that, and we'll talk about the actions in Washington, D.C. It's more exciting than any time in my lifetime that I remember. Jack, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, Donald, thanks for having me. And it's like people were doing show prep. It's got to be pretty frustrating because they can have the whole show prepared, and then by the time they get on the air, it's old news, and there's new news that's much more interesting, including today. We're speaking here on Friday, February 28th, which our friends on the left had hoped to make it a big national, don't shop for DEI day.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah.
That was a joke. And now it's not even vaguely newsworthy, given the events of the day.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And from my standpoint, my people know that I was, my hidden history books are the ones that sell. So I was going to write a fourth volume, and that was going to take on Trump, or it was going to be a standalone book on Trump, because Trump has so much to himself. He really, commands an entire book. But this second election and the way he's behaved thus far, which to me is polar opposite than he did the first time. I don't know what I'm going to do. I obviously have to put that on hiatus because I don't know where this is going, and it's a continuing story. We can't really write a book about it, so that's kind of put on hold. But there's a lot of great material there. But obviously, as you say, by the day's events, this stuff is just continuing to happen. So I think you look at it pretty much the same as I do. I'm a Trump agnostic, as I think I've told you before, and I don't love or hate him, and I was very disappointed with him the first time around. But I always hated the people that hated him so much that I got mistaken for supporting him, and now he's thrown me for a loop because he's just, some of the executive orders I could have written myself. I mean, he's just doing one thing after another, and of course the side, and most of my audience, I'm sure we're going to hear that from them, is that they believe this is being done with an agenda, that all this great stuff is happening. He's throwing us red meat so that they can go behind our back and chip us with AI and mRNA vaccines and Stargate and Neurogate, all these things that digitalized currency. So I said, well, I don't know why I have to have that. I'm enjoying these wins. So we'll be on the lookout for that. So what are your impressions of Trump thus far, and what's been going on?
I've been extremely pleased, and I'm like you. I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a Trump agnostic. I didn't vote for him in any primaries, but I voted for him every time he's run in a general election. I thought his first term was important, not just in what he accomplished, which was a fair amount, but what he exposed, which was even more. I mean, his first term, he was the canary in that coal mine, and he forced the hand of the deep state, and they continue to. They didn't know when they were ahead. They could have quit when they were ahead. Instead, they made him president a second time by making America aware of just how weaponized the judiciary was, how corrupt the culture was, and how hell-bent they were on defeating the very idea on which they were running, that is defending democracy. They made a mockery of the whole process. They pull a coup on their own sitting president and give us the least attractive candidate in their stable. So they fully deserve their fate. And including what happened today, I thought was just a real masterclass.
Well, yeah, well, we already have comments there. Okay, they can't wait to hear us talk about what happened today. I watched a 10-minute video on Forbes. I watched my friend Peter's. My son sent me that. My friend Peter Seacosh, great researcher, sent me another little clip. I'm sure most of you have heard it, but it was at the very. I don't know what to think because you've got an actor from Ukraine. This guy was an
yeah,
actor. Keep in mind, and Trump was a reality star and a WWE Hall of Famer. So you
right.
had them matching up in the Oval Office. Never seen anything like this before. It was one thing for, I guess, Khrushchev to pound the table in the kitchen debate or whatever. This is, I mean, Trump was did everything but push, Zelensky physically. Was right up in his face, wagging his fingers at him, just telling him off. And Zelensky's kind of like a scared little kid. J.D. Vance was telling him off as well. I've never seen anything. I don't know what to think of it. It was, again, it's just, it was like something out of WWE.
Well, I mean, it started off badly for Zelensky when he shows up, dressed in his pajamas. I mean, come on, that Trump is a formalist when it comes to office wear. Everyone else is there in a suit and tie. It's no big deal. Come on.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're 350 billion bucks in the hole already. And you walk in, your nation is on the verge of collapse. You had never had any chance of winning this war. And as Trump said, you have no cards, we have all the cards. So why are you trying to dictate terms here before the media? But I think that was it. He was playing the media hand. He, I think, had still deceived himself into thinking that Trump was an outlier and the American people were still behind him. Well, there's not a Ukrainian flag flying within 5 miles of my house. It's not like it was 3 years ago. People, have caught on. I mean, Trump is on the side of peace and stopping the killing. He's very outspoken about that. And Zelensky is on the side of what? I don't get it.
Well, yeah, he's talking, and that should be the. And again, and Chris Buchan is telling me he loves how so many boomers take face value. I question everything, Chris. You should know that. And I don't know what this was unprecedented. I'm not sure why they set it up like that for the press to be there. I don't really know. And Zelensky, you mentioned his attire. I guess he didn't have his usual fatigues on, where he's trying to pretend he's a soldier or something. But Trump did, I think, make some remark about him. Glad you got dressed up or something. I mean, he basically cut down his clothing. Typical Trump stuff. But I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And but what will come out of it, whether this is scripted or real or not, Trump over and over again stressed peace. And he said,
Right.
you're playing around with millions of lives and you're playing with World War III. So I don't know how he can't come out looking good from that.
Well, the media wouldn't like him. I mean, if during the course of that meeting, Trump came up with a cure for cancer, they would have found a reason to tell you cancer was a good thing. What was missed by the media and by a lot of people, which I thought was pretty critical, were the last couple minutes of what Trump was saying. This is something the media will bury because they don't want to talk about it. And what he did is he said very specifically is that Putin was the victim of the Russia collusion hoax and of the Hump and the Hunter Biden laptop scandal as much as he was. Because what they did, and this is right, is they scapegoated Russia in order to put Trump in to keep him out of the White House for starters, and then put him in prison afterwards. And they created a monster out of Russia. And up until 2015, up until Trump emerged as the leader of the Republican PAC, the Obama administration had been sucking up to Putin. For 7 years, they'd been doing this, right? And then after they needed Putin's help to pull off what Obama considered his signature achievement, and that was the Iranian deal, however shabby that was. For Trump, for Obama, was a big deal. So he called Putin, and in July of 2015, thanked him warmly for his help. He said, without that help, I could never have pulled this off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is July 2015. And then within the ensuing months, some bright light in the Democratic Party got the idea the way to beat Trump is to tie him to Putin. They knew the American media would forget the previous 7 years. They'd forget the reset button. They'd forget Obama's remarks about having more flexibility in my second term, right? They'd forget the Rosatom deal, which was incredible. They never even want to talk about that one, where we gave our uranium deposits away to an entity partly owned by Russia. They forgot about the Biden's trips to sell the high-tech equivalent of Silicon Valley in Russia. They forgot about the $500,000 that Bill Clinton had been paid to speak in Russia. This was all went by the wayside because they had to now create a mythical collusion between the presidential candidate they hated and Russia, whom they now had to hate. They had to train their people to hate Russia. The country they'd been ponying up to for the last 7 years, they now had to hate them. And then when Trump was elected president, they had so propagandized their own people and a whole lot of Republicans into thinking that Russia was such a monstrous country that we deserved a proxy war against them, that we should launch a proxy war against them and pour $350 billion into a war that was never going to be won.
Well, absolutely. And we never forget that I've written articles about this that we know from John Brennan, of all people, where he talked about, that the whole idea of Russiagate, as far as these things come out of any individual heads or the knowledge plan, came from Hillary Clinton. This was her idea, her baby. He said it himself.
Yep.
And, so this is, the guy, this is notion, but there are comments in the chat, and I'm going to be looking, and I'm sure you will be too. But I want to see, because after what happened today, again, for people not to think it's theater, there can't be one more dollar sent to Ukraine. So if we find out somebody saying he still left the White House with a check in hand, we're hearing he was thrown out. I don't know. But if he still got any money after today, then that's when people look at it and say, this is theater. Because, I mean, that I hope, let's hope that the tap is cut off here. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't say that they won't get dollars after today just to keep them afloat for a little while until the deal is sealed. We'll probably always be paying for Ukraine, one way or another. It's just that we're not going to be championing war. We're not going to be sending them more Javelin missiles, which Trump did in that first term, as he mentioned. I don't know that it's a game changer. I think they'll be back at the table in a week and get this thing wrapped up.
Well, you'd think, because in terms of how these things really work out and how much of this is legitimate and how much it is for the public consumption. But on the surface of it, it's ridiculous. Ukraine knows it has no chance.
Right.
They've lost so many people, and they continue, and parts of the left continue this nonsense about Ukraine is actually winning and Russia's, just crazy stuff that it reminds me of the old Monty Python skit, with I think it was the Black Knight saying, it's just a flesh wound as the guy's cutting off his arms and legs. And he's, it just reminds me of that. And it's just stupid. And so the idea and the fact that this guy is still being championed, whatever you think of Trump, this guy is, and I see people all the time, Liz Cheney of all people came out with some ridiculous meme that popped up on my social media about how this was such a dark day because, Trump, of course, criticizing Trump. And again, painting this guy Zelensky, who is, in all intents and purposes, a dictator. He's banned all opposition political parties. He shut down hundreds of newspapers. So whatever you think, how can this guy be portrayed as, and they keep saying, I guess that's their view of democracy. It's the same kind of democracy we saw after the 2020 elections, I guess.
It's interesting because as a student of history, I remember I paid a lot of attention to the Spanish Civil War, which was in many ways a prototype for a lot of the wars to come, in which the Republicans, the loyalists who were backed by Stalin, and had an anarchist faction that was busily killing nuns and priests, among other people, was finally opposed by Franco. Francisco Franco was a general, came over from Africa, from Morocco, and stemmed the tide. That war was a fictional war. I mean, there was people dying and there were bombs falling, but the battles being won and lost were being created in newsrooms around the world.
Yes.
The communists had taken over through the Comintern. They were literally dictating battles. They were making up whole battles and winning battles, and the reporting was so utterly corrupt that no one had any reason to feel confident about what actually transpired during that war. I will say, in the New York Times' favor, is they ran two columns about the war, one from the Franco side and one from the Republican side, because the reporting was so conflicting. But in Ukraine, now fast forward 90 years, where you have all kinds of media and all kinds of information. Have you ever seen a reporter on the front lines? I mean, telling us what's happened in a given battle? I have no idea whether there was a war at all,
Well, no, and that's a lot of people, and that's what again why, because of the way, and you've looked at a lot of these things. I've looked at a lot of them, and that's why you end up going down these rabbit holes, and that's why you get Sandy Hook type theorists, because there's so many elements that make no sense. And in this case, in this war, you have something like Bono, who is a rock star, a U2 guy who has become a political front man for the establishment and runs that one charity which gives 1.2%, one foundation, 1.2% of the donations to actual causes, and that didn't hurt him at all. He's still running it. His reputation wasn't affected.
Yeah.
He went over in the middle of. He went over and gave a concert in a war zone. I'm thinking, would Tommy Dorsey have done that in World War II? I mean, I've never heard of anything like that. And then you have Zelensky and his wife posing for these pictures, for Hollywood type pictures. It doesn't seem, and I early on I remember people were claiming that some of the video footage that they were showing in Ukraine was actually, just as we saw during COVID, it was actually from another part of the world 10 years earlier or something. So
Right.
people, yeah, they're gonna question this. What is really going on there? Is anything going on? And that's what happens because we're not being told the truth at all. But it's funny you mentioned about Spain because when I watched the original Saturday Night Live, I was a teenager and I never got the joke about General Francisco Franco is still dead. Chevy Chase would open the Weekend Update, and I kept thinking, who is that? I don't get the joke there. And of course, none of the audience got the joke too. They didn't either. But
Franco lived until into the 70s, So
yeah, right. And that was the idea. But they continued to defame him. They didn't say Mao Zedong's still dead. General, and that's because he did fight whatever he was, however iron-handed. He fought for Catholic Spain against, I think everyone in Hollywood belonged to what they call the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which was a Soviet front.
There wasn't a Franco brigade, right?
Yeah, no.
And a lot of those guys were writing screenplays and making movies, and the pro Stalin. They wouldn't say it was. I wouldn't say it was pro Stalin. They would be very sneaky about it, but the pro loyalist propaganda infiltrated many movies. Casablanca, right off the top, if you want one.
Yes.
And and then you had guys like Arthur Kessler, who was interesting because he wrote Darkness at Noon, famous communist turned freedom fighter. But he was in one of the newsrooms during that war, and he talks about it later. He goes, "We were making up battles, right? And we were winning them." Or if they wanted to make up hideous atrocities, they did a lot of that too. George Orwell went there as a war correspondent.
Yes, he taught. You're right, and he said the exact same thing, that they're just making this stuff up entirely. Right, and of course that influenced his writing of 1984.
Right, and it was in Spain that he realized how evil Stalinism was, and he had barely escaped with his life. And he wrote about it in a brilliant book called Homage to Catalonia, which is worth reading because it was really the genesis in 1984. It's odd because someone a nice, sweet relative who quoted to me the line from, she said, there's a line from a famous book. I don't know what it is. It's like the party's final essential command is to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. And she was referring to Trump's first 30 days, right? And I just said to her, I said, for 4 years, made believe that there was a president in the White House and that he was cognizant and sentient, and he could walk and talk. That was our eyes and ears. We were told not to believe what we're seeing. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what, and Orwell's work is more important now than ever. And the fact that he came from the left and saw what was happening. I mean, I quote him all the time because
yeah,
he deserves to be quoted. And God only knows what he would think of this world that we're living in now. But
and what Trump is doing now is he is shocking the world with truth, and it's pretty raw. And so it doesn't always come out the way you'd like it to come out or as neatly as you would expect it to be parceled out, but it's coming out. And there's so much of it, it's overwhelming. When you're probably the same as I, but when they first started talking about Doge, I thought, okay, it'd be some committee, they meet, they talk about things that could be cut.
Yeah.
But bam, right out of the gate, and these people are shocked. That's a truth shock, right?
Oh, it is, and I tell people all the time, and again, I get in trouble with my listeners and my readers, but it's like I said, if this was a President Ron Paul, many of us supported him, wanted him to win. If he had won the presidency, Doge is the kind of thing you would expect him to do. And
Right.
in fact, Ron Paul is advising Elon Musk. And most people, almost everybody, still universally loves Ron Paul and respects him. So I said, so what do you? I mean, I haven't heard him say anything about there's something wrong with the way this is being conducted or whatever. I mean, I don't understand how. I come from the left. Long time ago, we talked about sunshine laws and things like that. That's the best disinfectant. We wanted transparency in government, Freedom of Information Act, and all that. We didn't want anything classified. We hated the idea of national security is being withheld for that. And this is something that I don't understand. I'm getting in so many arguments with people because I said, I don't understand. Are you for this? I mean, are you just? But they're basically saying it's fake news. It's not true. I said, well, I don't. What evidence does he have? And I said, well, I've seen on X he's publishing contracts. Some of these contracts. Well, that could be okay. So anything could be fake then. I mean, I don't know how you argue anything. You just say it's fake.
Well, and that's a good point. If you go to my Wikipedia page, it says Jack Cashel, blah, 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 is a conspiracy theorist, right? Mm-hmm. And I've always considered myself the opposite of that. I'm an investigative reporter. I only deal in facts. I'm not cynical. I think it pays to be skeptical, but when you get cynical, and we all meet a lot of cynics, everything is fake. Everything is a black op. Everything is you're right. And then the next thing you know, you're telling the mothers and fathers in Sandy Hook that their kids were actors, right? I mean, that's where that leads. There is a common sense factor that has to be worked into everything you see that makes you think it might not be real. And that is, what's the theory of the case? What's the logic behind it? Why would actor X do this, right? And if you can't think of a good reason, then there's a chance that what you're seeing is actually what's happening. Because sometimes stuff happens. And, when I was doing, I did a book on the death of Commerce Secretary Ron Brown. Mm-hmm. And, when I got a nice advance. When I met with the publishers, I said, listen, and Ron Brown, just a quick refresher, was killed in a plane crash in 1996 in Croatia. He was a commerce secretary, black commerce secretary, under a cloud at the time, being and facing indictment on various charges. But I said to the publishers, I said, I am not going to write a book telling you that he was murdered unless I can prove he was murdered, right? I'm going to focus on why the plane went up, because I could write a whole book on that. What a scandal-ridden, corrupt entity he had become. He had become the principal bagman for Clinton and the China trade because they're in desperate quest to raise money for the 96 election. He was vulnerable. But then I got his business partner, confidant, lover, to cooperate with me. And she told me everything, truth teller, a great lady, Nalanda Butler. And then everything began to open up. But here's where it became um, obvious to me. And that is, I was content at the end. I realized I'd come up against a wall of information. And what I really needed was the US Air Force, their official report. No one in the media had ever requested it before. So I sent a request to Ramstein, Germany, where it was, and I got it back from an email back from some functionary saying, well, it's going to cost X thousands of dollars. It's only in paper. It's going to take X amount of months, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, okay, I have a summary of the report. I'll just live with the summary. It's the best I could do. So I emailed them back. I say, hey, I'm just going to live with the summary. Then about a day later, I get an email from a colonel who says, we're waiving all fees and it'll be there in a week, right? Now that tells me at that level that there's some truth telling that needs to be done. And when I got the report, it came on a pallet. The UPS guys are horrified because I have a second floor office and no elevator. Box after box after box. And I'd already written a book on TWA Flight 800, so I brought in my pilots, a few international pilots who helped me go through the technical data. I went through the interviews and all the other, other data. And at the end of the day, I had to conclude, I couldn't close the case, but I had to conclude that the best explanation is that Ron Brown was murdered. It is by far the best explanation for his undoing. And what I concluded was that the Croatian intelligence sabotaged the plane. And I explained how they did it based on the information my pilots had provided me.
You had the reports of the bullet hole in the head. I mean, was it?
The bullet hole in the head is interesting because also cooperating with me was this wonderful lady. We're still friends, Kathleen Janoski, who is the forensic photographer for the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. And she discovered the hole. And she and 3 pathologists had their careers ruined for going public with their findings. No autopsy. The Army, the Air Force, they were scapegoated. 6 officers were fired. 16 others had their careers, sidetracked to preserve the lie that this plane crash was avoidable and it was done through, pilot error basically or something. But even then, I can only take the reader to the point where I'm saying, here's all the evidence. Here's where the evidence points. I cannot tell you that Ron Brown was murdered. I can tell you that it's the best explanation for his death, but I cannot say more.
It makes it, and I know there's a couple of things. Catherine Z points out the flight attendant survived and later died. I remember reading that they had a survivor and then she died. But you had the bullet hole in the head, and then you had 2 things. One thing I can tell you, his family thought it because I was on a talk show. Well, it's probably been 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, and they had a call-in session, and one of the now maybe he was making it up, but one of the callers called in and claimed he was, I forget how he was related to Ron Brown. He was his nephew or something. He was related to him, and he talked about how within the family they all knew he was murdered, and they talked about it all the time. They just didn't want to talk about it publicly. So there's that. And then there's the woman you probably know more about. I wrote about it in Hidden History. There was a woman that I guess was his aide, maybe his lover, whose naked body was found dead in a closet at the Commerce Department. You talk about that? It was
I did. That is just one of those things. It was an incidental event. It was not related to Brown's death, although it's very suspicious. And this is what I mean. You got to be careful sometimes because sometimes just bad stuff happens. That's what I told my publisher. Sometimes shit happens, and you cannot write all of that off to conspiracy. In the case of the woman, you're right, the Commerce Department, I think it was over Thanksgiving, she shows up dead. Just like the intern of Joe Scarborough, who shows up dead.
Yes.
I mean, there are just sometimes things that look bad that aren't quite as bad as they seem. But just to tell you what happened with Ron Brown is that the best explanation is that they had a very primitive landing. It was right after the whole Balkan War was simmering down. The United States had allowed Croatia to ethnically cleanse the Serbs out of Croatia. They sided with Croatia. And so the Croatians were indebted. The fascist government and intelligence, the head of the intelligence service was the Tudjman's son, Franjo Tudjman's son. So they were indebted to the United States. What's likeliest explanation is that the plane was making a perfectly controlled landing just using radio beacons. And they did what they call beaconing, is they set up a false beacon off to the mountainous interior, lured the plane off course, crashes into a mountainside. Then they put out the message that the plane had crashed into the Adriatic off the western side. And so there were 4 hours before rescuers reached the plane. In the interim, I'm convinced that Croatian intelligence went right to the site of the crash, and finding Brown's body otherwise intact. And I talked to the people who saw the bodies as they came in. They put a bullet hole in the very top of his head. It was almost not visible because it wasn't like in the front. It was in the very top, like it was a cattle prod, like it was, and made sure he was dead. He was the one flight attendant. She was actually an Air Force steward, whatever they call them, survived until the rescue people got there. She was seriously damaged, and they made an extremely good faith effort to get her out of there. And because it was pouring rain afterwards. They used rain as the excuse for the landing. It wasn't raining when it was landing. It did start raining later. And she died when they tried to rescue her, tried to bring her down the hill. That was legit. So there's legitimate elements and illegitimate elements all working in one scenario and scene. And you really have to be careful to distinguish one from the other. One other piece of incriminating evidence, though, Don, is that the guy who was responsible for airport aviation systems was off work that day. And a day later, he shows up with a shotgun blast to his chest, kills him. And the official explanation was that he was upset over a love relationship that had gone awry, And for the New York Times, that was enough. The New York Times had a guy on the plane, a reporter on the plane who died. They never requested the Air Force report, right? That's the state of journalism.
Well, it's like Michael Hastings and working for Rolling Stone, and they had no interest in his very strange death either, and neither did his wife. So this goes beyond that. But I hate to, but Duke Valentino, we went through this last week. Email me. I gave you my email address. I'll find what you're looking for. Give me the page number of the book again, because I can't do it on the air here. And I'll say I'm sure I had a source, and if not, I'll find one. But anyway, yeah. So there's so many things we talk. I first became aware of your work by your book on TWA Flight 800,
right?
Which was you were to me, you were the go-to guy on that, and you've had so many other things, the white flight thing, the books about Obama, and where do you stand on Obama's birth controversy? What do you think is
I have a theory that, and I think I'm right. And it's the theory that, to me, that makes most sense out of the data we have. And what I do, and a lot of people on our side don't bother doing it, but they should, and that is read the mainstream material. These people have better access to information than we do in some instances. That's to say they'll ignore a lot of it, but they have it. Here's what we know about Barack Obama's mother. We'll call her Ann Dunham. She spent her entire adolescence in Seattle, Washington. And she was admittedly a wild child in her senior year in high school. She, ran away with some guy, sort of Jack Kerouac style, hung out to jazz bars, was an aspiring young lefty with a penchant for exotic men of black men or other men of other colors,
Mm-hmm.
In the summer of 1960, her otherwise stable parents, Stanley, who's sort of the low man in the financial totem pole in the family, and her mother, Madeline, the banker, pull up stakes abruptly and moved to Hawaii. Now, all the mainstream biographers acknowledged, yeah, they pulled up stakes, and Anne didn't want to go, and the mom had to give up her very good job at the bank. And the best reason they can give for the move is that Stanley saw an opportunity in the retail furniture business, right? Well, I was alive in 1960. I had a neighbor in 1960 who pulled up stakes and went to Wisconsin, right? She comes back 6 months later, and that's how it was done in 1960. When you conceived a child out of wedlock, you left, right? You left town. If you conceived a child out of wedlock with a black man, you left the state, right? You moved to, in this case, the most tolerant state in the union for a biracial baby.
Right.
So then you ask, well, why would the Obama's people go to such trouble to protect his birth certificate if all that was wrong with it was the date, right?
Exactly.
Because I believe he was born in February of 1961, not August. And then the answer is this, is in 2004, when Barack Obama first made his move on the national stage, he gave the keynote address, the Democratic National Convention in Boston, he leads with what became his signature appeal. I shouldn't be here today. I'm improbable. The result of an improbable love story between a Kenyan goat herder and a girl from Kansas. He always puts her in Kansas, right?
Yeah.
And had it not been for their love and their multicultural harmony, I wouldn't be here today. Unfortunately, my father left when I was 2 years old and went back to Harvard, right? Well, here's the reality, as far as I can see it, is that when he gave that speech in 2004, he thought it was true. His parents weren't CIA spies creating a legend for him when he was a baby. They were grandparents, rather, were just trying to give their son a name and a legitimacy, right? So as soon as they get to Hawaii, they recruit this African guy who for him, what he needed was to stay on his a visa so he can continue his education in Hawaii. He's a big playboy. He had a wife back in Kenya. By my timetable, if she had gotten impregnated by Barack Obama, it would have had to been in November of 1960, a month after she started school. They probably met in Russian class, as we were told. But I think the old man, the grandfather, said, "Hey, we need to put a face on this kid's birth certificate." And Africans at that time had a better reputation in America than African Americans. They were treated better. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And so he gets to have his Hapa, pregnant white wife. He gets his stay from the INS. The baby is born in February. And all that has to be falsified at this point then, if presuming the baby is born at home, is that 6 months later they send a notice to the paper saying, "Hey, baby was born today," right? They could have pulled that off because mom and dad were both scam artists. And why did they protect that? Because if it was turned out that after, let's say by the time Obama comes to run for president, his own people have done a dumpster dive on his background to see what his vulnerabilities are, they realized there's a huge hole in his history. Not only do they know now that they never lived together, the mother and father never lived together, but that the mother went back to Seattle in this fall of 2008, 1961, when Obama was allegedly a few weeks old, and enrolled at the University of Washington. This is fact, right? So the media said on all of that, when Philip Berg, who was the former deputy attorney general of Pennsylvania, Democrat, Hillary supporter, sues the Obama White House to see the birth certificate. This is in 2008, while Hillary's still a candidate. They pull out the big guns from Perkins Coie. And so the same people who produced the Steele dossier would produce the birth certificate. They went back to Perkins Coie in 2011 too. So Perkins Coie, they spent millions with Perkins Coie, keeping the birth certificate out of the hands of people like Philip Berg and other people who asked for it to see it thereafter. It wasn't until 2011 and Donald Trump started leaning on him, that they executed this elaborate coup, which coincided with the capturing of Osama bin Laden. They released the birth certificate of Osama bin Laden's captured 2 days later. End of conversation, right?
Yeah.
It was incredible, a bit of hijinks on their part. I got to give them credit for this. The strategy.
After the birth certificate was released, too, you had the plane crash that killed one woman, and that's where I first Trump tweeted about it. Very strange. That's where he became really noted for this.
Right, poor Loretta Fuddy in a plane crash. Only one person dies in a plane crash.
Yeah. Yes, yep.
And it just happens to be the woman who's the custodian of the birth certificate.
Yeah.
They sent in 2011. By this time, when I got into this a little deeper, because I didn't follow it that closely then, but in the spring of 2011, I got a call from Michael Cohen, and he introduced himself. I am Michael Cohen. I didn't know who he was, because I'm a lawyer for Donald Trump. Okay. And he wanted to know what I knew about Barack Obama's origins. And so I told him what I knew. And I also told him about where I said Obama's most transparent vulnerability is the authorship of his books, since I'd broken that story in 2008, that Bill Ayers was the principal author of Dreams from My Father.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump talked about that several times. With Laura Ingraham, he talked about it with Sean Hannity, but the media refused to go there, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to hit him with the birth certificate. They refused to talk about Barack Obama as author. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's accessible to ordinary people. In fact, I wrote my book, Unmasking Obama, celebrating all the individuals who broke the stories that made Obama's presidency so scandalous. Every one of them came from the grassroots up. Ordinary people just doing research on a given subject and then pushing it up the media food chain until, finally someone in a higher place notices it. And then when that someone notices it, like a Cheryl Atkinson or, they have their careers, sabotaged by the deep state, Laura Logan, both of them, major players on CBS. Both of them no longer welcome in the world of the CBS newsrooms.
No, they're in our world now, and that's true. And then it's. But you're right. And the reason again, and somebody in the chat room said something. I mentioned about Obama being a test tube, and that I've heard that. And the reason is because there's so many gaps in his background. And why are his school records still being withheld? And you had that I'm sure you know this better than I do, but I wrote about this, but there was a guy at Harvard that taught political science there, and he had a great quote where he said, every major future political leader took a class at Harvard. And he said, I don't remember Barack Obama at all. And nobody from Harvard remembers. So that's what builds these theories, because it's like, doesn't make any sense. This impressive black guy who's going to be the first president. Why wouldn't?
Well, sometimes again, Don, and sometimes there are simpler explanations. Let's go to Occam's razor on this one. The simplest explanation that, by the way, is, as translated from Latin actively, is the simplest explanation that incorporates all the relevant variables is the best explanation, not just the simplest one. And why don't they want to show his college transcript? Because his grades suck. That's why. And he got into Harvard Law School anyhow. I have seen the Harvard commencement program from the year he would have graduated. I think was that 1983 or 1 or 2 something. And he's on it, but he didn't graduate with honors, right? To get into Harvard Law School at that time, at any time, you needed to ace your LSATs, and you needed to have like a 3.9 or above on your grades. But if you were coming in with a 2.5 on your grades and a 1,200 on your LSATs, and you're in Harvard, your whole career is a fraud. We know that now. How did they get Michelle into Harvard Law School, right? Obama's smarter than his wife. I will give him that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's so, and that's why you have all the theories. Big Mike, all this stuff gets there because there's so much mystery around him and so much kind
Right.
of you can't go there. Anything you question about him is racist. And then you had Andrew Breitbart who makes this pronouncement. I found this damning videotape from Harvard that breaks everything wide open about Barack Obama, and then he drops dead. And then the
Yeah.
coroner dies mysteriously. It's like, so you wonder why people have these theories. I mean, and I saw the tape that was supposedly that, and it was very strange. It was he was it hardly showed Barack Obama at all. Like, it was a very weird thing where he was the speaker, but it kept going around the crowd, and it showed him a few times, but not like you would normally see a speech where the camera's focused on the speaker. And
Yeah.
I think he was defending some black. I forget the guy's name that was, issuing typical anti-white comments. But I don't know what you thought of that, but I mean, that was a very, and it feeds into what people think because it just, how do you explain it?
No, in an era where you have every right to be suspicious, when someone like Andrew Breitbart just falls over dead on the street when he's 45 years old, or
Yeah,
um, you have every reason to be suspicious.
yeah,
Breitbart was so important. He was such a major force. Uh, for a non-political person, I mean, not until Elon Musk do we have someone of that impact on the culture. But yeah, and if he falls over dead, yeah, you have every reason to be suspicious. But at the same time, I talked to people who knew Andrew well. I just met him a couple times, and they said, "Boy, he was burning candle at both ends." It didn't shock them, the people who knew him best. So, you can't be,
well,
you
it was the
can't.
timing. It was the timing, right? Because basically, and I think they happened very close together, them and Michael Hastings, but both of them
Yeah,
died right after saying, "Hey, I've got this big thing coming," and they both said the same thing, and then boom, it's like, okay, what do you
yeah,
expect the
both were
conspiracy
Los
world to
Angeles,
think?
right? Was
Hmm?
Hastings Los Angeles?
Michael Hastings, yeah.
Was Los
Yeah,
Angeles? Wasn't he killed there or died?
yes, Los Angeles, but he,
Yeah,
he he said, "I'm going underground. I'm working on a really big story. I've got to lay low or something." Then
yeah,
boom, he runs
yeah,
like 500 miles an hour into a tree or something. It's like, what?
yeah. Whereas Breitbart was, never went into hiding. He lived his life as publicly as anyone could.
Yeah,
And he was a great character because he understood the theatrics of politics.
yeah, exactly. And so, but so let's. I want to make sure we get some Ashley Babbitt on the record here. So that's your most recent book, and it's about
Yeah.
Ashley. Now, is it a biography of her, or is it just an examination of what happened on January 6th?
Here it is. It's Ashley. The and it's the subtitle is "The Untold Stories of the Women of January 6th." What I wanted to do was write a book about Ashley Babbitt, but there's not enough material to write a real book. So I expanded it to include 9 other women. And I took them from why did they go to Washington? What led up to that? And then I took them through their day, how they got there, what happened to them once they got there, what happened to them afterwards, and what's happened to them since. Of the 10 women, 2 were killed that day. Excuse me, Ashley Babbitt, and who everyone knows about, and Roseanne Boylan, who almost no one
Yes.
knows about,
Yeah.
whose death was even more malicious than Ashley Babbitt's.
Mhm.
8 other women, the 8 other women I picked almost at random. I didn't know any of them. And I was amazed. I was really pleased that I got all 8 of them to cooperate with me because there's a lot of risk involved and there's a lot of trust issues involved, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But of the 8 women, all 8 were incarcerated. The worst crime any one of them committed was to help break a window. And that woman, a mother of 8, was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. So they're all out now, and they're all very grateful to be out. But they'll always be traumatized. That trauma will haunt them, even if in the moment, they feel like they've overcome it. But I've worked with a lot of ex-prisoners, and They never really quite get over it.
Sure. Well, especially something like this. I mean, they're so politically inspired.
Yeah.
Chris Graves asks, and this is a question a lot of people ask: what's the story on? We've heard the stories about Ashley being cremated by the coroner, maybe without the family or whatever. What was the story about that?
Uh, I don't know that that happened. I don't think that they cremated her without the family's permission. I believe she was cremated, and I believe her ashes were scattered over the Pacific. She lived in San Diego.
Hmm.
Um, she was denied a military funeral, any kind of military honors at her funeral, even though
Oh,
she was a 14-year veteran,
yeah, yeah,
because they had to suppress her martyrdom and elevate the martyrdom of Brian Sicknick, the
yes,
Capitol police officer who died of a stroke on January 7th,
yeah,
unrelated to January
yeah,
6th. And so they gave him full military honors at Arlington, even though, and he was a good guy. He didn't deserve his fate. He didn't deserve to be that civic blasphemy that followed his death, putting his ashes in the Capitol Rotunda. And, you know,
yes,
they knew he wasn't murdered. They knew on day one. But they fed the New York Times a story. He dies on January 7th of a stroke, a series of strokes. Totally organic, as the medical examiner's report said, unrelated to any external.
no
Uh,
fire extinguisher to the head that they continue sometimes to still report.
but on January 8th, the New York Times ran with the story that two law enforcement officials, let's quote, had provided them that Sicknick had been hit over the head by a fire extinguisher by pro-Trump
Yeah,
supporters, and then they added this sort of ghastly detail just to give it more effect. They said he was rushed out of the Capitol with blood flowing from a huge wound in his head. Total fiction. And
mhm,
when you add that detail, it's not a miscommunication. That's a fabrication.
yeah,
If I were Cash Patel, I'd want to know who those two law enforcement officials are. That's one way to break the case pretty quickly.
yeah. And how about the officer? I mean, the officer that shot was given an award afterwards. And this is a guy who had left a loaded gun in
Yeah,
the Capitol bathroom before. He should have been fired for that. So, is there a chance Cash Patel could go after this guy?
that's. I don't know if he would, but he probably should. Should at least fire him. If he's still
Yeah,
pulling payroll. Not only that, but the it's interesting to see the exchange of emails between him, Michael Byrd, now Captain Michael Byrd, who's promoted
he's
for shooting
promoted. Yeah,
at and the Democrats in the House and their supportive staff. He's basically pressuring them to get him more benefits. You know, he got like a $30,000 signing bonus, and they put him up at the presidential suite at the Joint Base Andrews, and one thing after another, is they were appeasing him, right? Because it was critical to the narrative that he stay on board, right?
yes.
That he never apologized for shooting Ashley Babbitt or cooperate with the incoming administration. And there were several cops, basically the celebrity cops who were lying through their teeth about everything, and they got paid to lie, and they got rewarded for lying, and they got to be called heroes and paraded around. It's disgraceful. The woman who killed, I won't say she killed Roseanne Boylan. Oh, but Roseanne Boylan may already have been dead when
Yeah.
Lila Morris picked up a stick, a
Yes.
branch,
Yes.
and started pounding her over the head with it
Yeah.
until the branch broke. She was rewarded with a trip to the Super Bowl a month later, where she was
Yeah.
treated as
Yeah.
the heroine.
Exactly. And Matthew Burns tells us, why do you guys believe in Cash Patel? Come on, guys. I'm not saying I believe in anybody. Cash Patel says some interesting things, unlike any other FBI director I've ever seen. We'll see what he does. Right now, a lot of interesting stuff is happening, but whether it's the Doge disclosures or anything else, you have to hold people accountable, or this is really all for naught. If people
Right.
aren't
I mean,
held
why would you be
accountable for the,
suspicious? Put it this way: why would you
yeah,
be suspicious of Cash Patel?
yeah,
What
well,
about
again,
his
well,
makes anyone suspicious that his motives aren't what they say he says they are?
yeah, because of Trump, and again, so many people, and again, I talked about the Trumpenstein project in his first time around, and he's shocking me with what's happening now. Look, I'm going to be the first one that to come back and criticize him if this thing goes south because I'm still unsure about because we don't really know what's happening in terms of the deportations because both sides may be lying. I mean, the left is going histrionic about how many people are being deported, and everybody's and the MAGA side may be trying to exaggerate. I'm not sure what's happening there. So, and the same thing with mass firings. I heard somebody tell the other day, "Oh my God, there's mass firings in the federal government. They're firing everyone." I said, I'm dubious about that. I'm really dubious about it. But again, both sides have a reason to say that, so it's hard to determine what exactly the truth is. That's why you got to have some high-profile prosecutions. A prosecution of Michael Byrd would be great on a lower
Yeah.
level, but it would show something that you're holding somebody accountable for January 6th. We know that Biden gave preemptive pardons to the whole January 6th committee, and so you can't really do anything there. But to see people, wouldn't you expect? So if Kash Patel goes after Andrew McCabe and Comey and Ray and all these people, as I would think you would expect, and certainly Hillary Clinton, because of the ridiculous Russiagate thing, which was an obvious hoax. I
Well,
mean,
he has one issue that he faces that would make prosecution very difficult, and that is that Trump got 6% of the vote in the District of Columbia, which is why all of the J6ers
yes,
were
yes,
convicted by any J6er went before a DC jury was convicted, no matter how
yes,
specious the charges. And
yes,
conversely, and that's why Durham had trouble. And no matter how open and shut were the cases against guys like Sussman and Danchenko, they were acquitted. Bam, right? That's I would be content with seeing, Don, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like they had in South Africa after the fall of apartheid, where people confess to their crimes and they're given basically amnesty. Uh,
yeah,
and if they don't confess, then we'll take them to court. That would
yeah,
get to me justice at this stage is getting the truth out. Um,
yeah,
there's no way to compensate for the people who've been unjustly imprisoned. You don't do that by imprisoning other people. You get them by exposing them, ruining them, banning them from the ever coming into Washington or going into federal building. I'm impressed by the speed that they're doing everything. And I'll be honest, when I hear people saying, "Well, they haven't done X," it's 35 friggin' days. Come,
yeah.
it's
No,
amazing.
yeah, definitely. There's no question about that. But I think it has to, because especially if this auditing of Doge continues, and it should, you can't leave it at USAID. But if you go to the CIA, you go to the FBI, you go to the Pentagon, you go to HHS, you go to the Federal Reserve, hopefully, and you find these things, FEMA, all these agencies, Education Department, Energy Department, you're probably going to find way more stuff, certainly with the CIA and the Pentagon. But then at some point, people have to be held accountable. You have to figure, okay, who, for instance, at USAID, the 6,200 journalists that were paid around the world, and an obvious
Yeah.
extension of Operation Mockingbird. Okay, you got to find out, okay, who authorized that?
Right. Oh,
Who
yeah. Right.
authorized the payment? And those people had to be held accountable. Otherwise, that's what heads have to roll. Otherwise, people are going to think this is just for show.
No, but the place where they're not going to roll is in the DC courts. You got to find a way around
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Maybe change a venue, whatever. But in DC, they're going to acquit everyone. Um, no, I agree with you on that. And there's so many strings that could be pulled. So many. I mean, I'd love to jump in there. I'm willing to go work with the FBI if I could just give me the 800 beat. The TW 800 beat. I can expose that one. Um,
Yeah.
but I tell you what about the FBI. Kash Patel, whatever you think of him, when they gave him Dan Bongino, that told me they're serious, right? I like Dan Bongino. I don't think there's anyone better.
Well, again, these guys like Bongino and Hegseth, that came from Mox News, they have a chance to walk the walk now to some degree. So we'll
Yeah.
see, because they've been very critical, and okay, we'll see what you do when you get in there.
And for Bongino, you're giving up a $1 million empire, You're making several million
Right,
dollars a year. You have a whole support staff depending on you. Walking away from that. It's hard to
right,
be cynical about what he did. Uh,
right.
it's a
Well, look,
difference between giving up some job in some bureaucracy to take another job in a bureaucracy. and let alone Elon Musk. You know, all of these guys were independently. It's just an all-star cabinet. I'm sorry, this is the smartest cabinet I've ever seen assembled.
Well, I mean, RFK Jr. Is my favorite pick ever, and I just, and again, I'm a Kennedy fanboy. My audience knows that, but I think he's an incredible choice. So I'm really waiting to see what he does there, and I would love to see what an auditing of HHS shows. That would
Yeah.
just be incredible because there's got to be so many things there dating back to when Fauci was, and of course Fauci now can't be prosecuted. I'm not sure, what those preemptive pardons means. Does that mean that none of those people can ever be prosecuted for anything? I mean, how does that work? I mean,
And that's where I think a lot of frustration comes with people because they'll say, "Oh, they're going to deport these many people. They're going to fire these many people." Everything they do meets with pushback. So their goals
yeah,
may be to deport X amount of people, but then they're going to run into the ACLU. They're going to run into courts. They're going to, and they can't just stomp all over that stuff. They've got to, honor it to the degree it can be honored. But I mean, Tom Homan, come on, how can you not like this guy?
well,
I
he
think it's
certainly
all
took.
shit, and he'll tell you that they're not deporting the millions of people per day. They're going after the bad guys first, but it takes time, especially when you're being sabotaged by your own forces, who are leaking information as to where you're going next.
Well, they are, but this, again, this is certainly. I never expected this. Like I said, I expected it to be like the first time around. So we'll see where it goes from here. But what do you think about most amazing thing to me? And this is again why so many people think this is all staged or something. I expected there to be tons of marches in the streets and maybe burnings, buildings and stuff when Trump got in this time. I'm amazed at the muted response. I mean, yeah, you have people going crazy on TikTok and everything, but George Soros must have run out of money or something because there's been no protests, no wheelbarrows full of bricks. I mean, the pussy hats have been nowhere in the streets, and they've got to be. The Trump derangement syndrome is way worse now because he's actually doing something. So
Right.
they're going crazy. Why
Well, I
are
mean,
why,
I think one advantage you have is when you're inaugurated in January, and you
yeah,
have
well, yeah,
we had I don't know where you are, Don, but we had the coldest
yeah.
winter in our memory.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in DC. I mean, outside DC. So yeah, and it's but the last time it didn't take them long to get out in the streets and put the pussy hats on and shout, "Not my president." I mean, they've really got to think, "Not my president" now. So
No, but there,
I
there's a couple things I've noticed, but it's a good point you raise. Um, on my Facebook page, I don't unfriends real friends and real family members historically for
mhm,
politics,
right,
except in the last month they've gone crazy, right?
yeah, they have,
You probably noticed that too, to
yes,
the point where I first I posted a notice and I said, listen, I said I don't unfriends and family, but please ease up on this hysteria. People who might post once a week are now doing 6, 10, 20 times a day with stupid memes about Hitler and tyrants and
yes,
authoritarian. I mean,
yes,
and virtually all females, by the way, I will say. This is
yeah,
a whole phenomenon, the what I call the ELF phenomenon, the educated liberal female phenomenon.
yeah, yeah.
So finally, after a while, I just said, I said, I'm going to sticking to the Hitler metaphors. I'm going to have my own night of the long knives. I
Yeah,
went
yeah,
Facebook and started unfriending people, right?
oh
Uh,
yeah.
including my own brother.
Oh boy. Well, yeah,
So,
yeah, Brad, you would all experience that. I mean, today I had a big argument and something I started again talking about Doge between I mean, they don't know each other, but my neighbor and my cousin.
yeah.
Or as I say, it's just because this people see it different ways, and I try to point out about these. I never worked for well, actually, I did work for the government briefly when my adult education program, unbelievably enough, paid me to teach a class in adult education on the JFK assassination briefly, well, for a few
Oh,
years. But other than that, I've never been. But I live in the DC suburbs, so it's full of government workers. It's full of double and triple dippers. So I mean, everything. The CIA's around here, the Pentagon. I mean, all the government is. So this is an area that's very, partial to, they're very upset about this, because this is the side their bread is buttered on. But I pointed out, look, in private industry, how many thousands of people have been laid off, outsourced,
Sure.
downsized?
Right.
And you don't get this public outcry of it. Okay, it just says, and the CEOs will get bigger bonuses for doing it. But for some reason here, they're just going, the government workers have never had to worry about being replaced by foreign visa workers or being
Yeah.
downsized.
Right.
This is the first time, and they so, oh wow, I was a hard worker. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not condemning all government workers, but if you, in the case of private industry, they don't do it because you're not a good worker. They're trying to save money. It's completely
Yeah.
unjustified. They just say, no, I
Right.
need a bigger bonus, and I'm bringing in foreign. So what are your well, don't you think the left obviously betrays themselves when they don't get as upset about thousands of workers being laid off?
No, I mean, they didn't get upset at all when we were laying off people for refusing the vaccine. In fact,
No,
they were
exactly. Yes, yes,
they
yes.
were pillorying those people. They were
Yeah.
scolding them or hectoring them.
Right.
Today, by the way, is like National Protest something or another day. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Friday.
Yes.
It's don't buy at all these stores, including McDonald's, because they've rolled back their DEI policies. It was the lamest national protest I've ever seen, and it was immediately countered by Patriots buying day. And
Mm,
so I went out and filled my gas tank today. And went to lunch.
mm,
So uh,
yeah.
the that was a stupid thing, and then that got so eclipsed by the Oval Office encounter that even what humble little news it might have made was driven away. No, part of it is they are so disconsolate, disorganized. I was watching an interview with Karine Jean-Pierre, right? I
Yeah.
mean, who is the spokeslady? Remember
Hmm.
her?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what was revealing about it, she seems more like a human being in a regular setting. Doesn't seem any smarter, but more like a human.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you could tell that she was being asked like, who do we rally around now? She goes, I don't know. I just really don't know where to turn. And
Hmm.
she said it certainly wasn't the Kamala. She dissed Kamala. Um, and
Interesting.
but you see that too when even sane Democrat, or sane, I say relatively sane, people like Bill Maher or James Carville even or
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith, you
Oh
can see
God.
they're at a
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah.
They're bewildered. They've never faced this before, and what they've never faced before too is the loss of control of the media. Now the New York Times, CNN, they're just another voice, just
Yeah.
someone out there talking. I mean, Megyn Kelly gets bigger ratings than CNN does. Um,
Yeah.
so they don't have the power to shame anymore, or
No.
to
Yeah.
dictate fear. You know how it would be in the past. Republicans closed down the government for a day, and next thing we know, all these forest rangers are, out there and babies dying, whatever, and then everyone's embarrassed and they open up the government again. They've lost that power, right?
Yeah. And the response that the left is they're not. They're not learning and trying to they're not thinking that maybe they're too extreme and it's turning off too many people. They're doubling down on it. I mean,
Yeah.
they seem like they continue. I mean, the idea that Stephen A. Smith's name. I don't know if you ever watched Jason Whitlock's podcast,
Oh, yeah, I
Fearless, but
watch them a
he's
lot. I like them.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's great. So you know the work he's a black guy and he's the best. He says things that no white guy could say.
Yeah.
And let's put it that way. And he does it very well. But he's a real investigative journalist. The work he did on Stephen A. Smith, he looked into his background. And it may seem trivial because it has to do with lying about basketball and stuff, but it shows that the guy is a complete charlatan. And
Well, and he
he,
made a very good argument, Don, and you have a good point there that Stephen A. Smith, like everyone else on ESPN, was beholden to the corporate agenda, the line that
yeah,
the
yeah,
corporations took. And that is,
yeah,
you cannot criticize men playing girls' sports, for instance,
yeah, right,
that being the most transparent one. Um, and so,
exactly.
and as Jason Whitlock says, anyone who works for the places has to honor that. And so
Yeah.
they're being untrue to themselves, Excuse me one second. I just had to stand up. Don't want to
Well,
show too much. I've been sitting in place too long.
but he refers to it as installed, and he got that from the comedian Cat Williams, and I think it's a great term
Yeah.
that people are installed, especially and I'm writing a book on sports right now, and it's going to be my most controversial book ever, and it's nobody will publish it. I'll probably self-publish it, but
And
I'm
what's
doing
the
it
theme?
anyhow. Well, the theme
What's
is
the
it's gonna be a lot about the racial dynamics in sports, and
yeah
it's gonna. I mean, I'm gonna have tons and tons of facts and figures about how it's basically football and basketball is a giant DEI project. And I'm going to show, I mean, I've got tons and tons of white athletes that were discriminated against that ran faster 40 times, jumped higher, were more productive, and were not allowed to play. And
yeah
they're everywhere. And they're just not, they don't have a, they don't, and they throw them down the memory hole. I have to try to find some of these old high school athletes there because they don't, the search engines know what you're looking for, even in something like that now. They
yeah
make it harder to do your job. Since I first started writing books, I'm sure you've seen that too. But so Stephen A. Smith is he represents everything wrong with sports because he's so loud. He was the first one I saw that I said, this guy can't be real. When I first saw him and heard him, I said, no, I mean, he just screamed all the time, and he was just such a. I mean, he's a clown, as Jason Whitlock said. They're basically a different kind of step and fetch it. They're just ridiculous, and they're
yeah
such a caricature. And the idea that Whitlock, through great journalism, has shown that he completely lied about his background. He completely
right
invented it. And
yeah
it's just something as stupid about basketball. Okay, you didn't play basketball. Why can't you admit that? Why are
right
you
right
making up this? I mean, okay, lots of us didn't. Why would you make that up? But this, but they're ESPN and everybody's still covering up for him, and they hate Whitlock for it. But here now, the idea that he's number 4 in a poll of possible Democratic candidates
yeah
for
yeah.
president. What does that say about the Democratic
It's his
Party?
desperation. It's like the Oprah position. I had
Hmm.
spent an afternoon with Stephen A. Smith some years ago, about 20 years ago.
Oh
I wrote a
wow.
book on boxing, specifically about Muhammad Ali, basically saying that he was a fraud. But
Yes,
I
yes, I
put it on.
agree.
It was called Sucker Punch, and I got an
The
hour.
invisible punch. Yeah.
Well, not that punch. That was the sucker punch. Was the sucker punch America
Oh,
got that we were led to
right,
believe
exactly.
that
Yeah, sure.
this guy was like a hero and a blah 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 when he was spent 12 years enthralled to uh, the Nation of Islam, a group that
Hmm.
when Malcolm X left them, uh, Malcolm X said, "Yeah, I spent 12 years of my life as a zombie," you know, and then Obama betrays Malcolm X. I'm sorry, not Obama. Muhammad Ali betrays Malcolm X, leading to his murder, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then takes over as the King Tut at the mosque for 10 years. And in those 10 years is his championship years. He's humiliating Joe Frazier. He's a total racist, violating every Muslim restriction there is on women. That's for sure.
Hmm.
And we're made to believe that he's this great American hero. That was the theme of my book.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
so I
I didn't know
spent
you
an
wrote
hour
that.
on. At that time, Smith had a show called Frankly Speaking.
Yes.
He was the host of it, and he had a studio audience. And so my book was the center of the conversation.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
they brought in Jim Brown. I'm afraid
Yeah.
to listen. He's 80 years old. He still kicked my butt.
Oh, he's very
And
intimidating. Yes.
some other people, high profile people. And I held them. I did well because I knew the subject better than they did.
I'm sure nobody agreed with you.
Yes and no around the edges. They were afraid to
Yeah.
disagree because and when I said that he betrayed Malcolm X,
Okay. Well, that makes that's
they'll say, "Oh, well, yeah, well,
Mhm.
he did," and that he could have saved Malcolm X's life, but he didn't. Um, so anyhow, but the point of it all is that I had to spend hours with Smith before the show, during the show, a little bit after the show. He is the most charmless human being I've ever spent that much time with.
Yeah.
He was so it wasn't, I wouldn't even say it was hostile. Hostile took some effort. It's just so indifferent to my presence there.
Yeah.
Never for a moment said, "Hey, you comfortable, Jack? And can I get you a cup of coffee?" Nothing. Not
Yeah.
remote interest in a human being other than himself.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just my take on it.
Well, and clear, he's a perfect example of somebody who's installed. Like
Yeah,
Barack Obama, there are holes, and this guy, there's tons of holes in his backstory. All of us, if we ever come to real prominence, uh, you're not gonna. I say I'm not gonna have any holes in my backstory. I mean, people are gonna be able to see, okay, this is what the guy was.
yeah.
In the case of these people, they're holes, they're gaps that don't make any sense. In the case of Stephen A. Smith, he's lied about everything, but the idea that this guy is now going to be a presidential candidate is amazing. But I did not know you wrote a book about Muhammad Ali. I'll talk a little bit. In fact, I talked a little bit about him in there because it's my contention that Sonny Liston was murdered later. And unlike most people, I don't think he was murdered because he refused to throw a fight to a white fighter, which is what they want you to believe.
No, it's
I think he
he
was
was
murdered because
a
I think
troubled
it was.
soul. I have a friend who's written extensively about Sonny Liston, huge Sonny Liston fan,
Mhm,
and
yeah.
if you ever wanted to guest to talk about Sonny Liston, I could set that up with you. He'd be thrilled. You know,
Okay. Well, I mean, but my contention is, and again, this is just speculation, but knowing what that invisible punch was, and for those who don't resonate, and this has so much in it because this is where Howard Cosell came to prominence, and Howard Cosell helped poison sports
right?
journalism with just a whole different style, and he's like, I don't care about the numbers, and that's why my book is going to be about the numbers and statistics. I do care about the numbers; they matter, but people like Cosell managed to show people, no, this guy's really much better, even though the numbers say a completely different story because Howard Cosell said so. I know.
But
And
Cosell has
so,
something in common with Stephen A. Smith, I think, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
is, as annoying as they both are,
yeah.
uh, they both made whatever they were talking about sound important, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. And
They
Cosell
elevated
could be
it from
measured. Yes,
commonplace to something of great significance.
he could Cosell could be mesmerizing. There's no
Yeah,
question about it. And when I was a teenager, I loved Monday Night Football because it was different and
yeah.
Cosell was different. But then when I looked at it and started investigating these things and saying, well, I always thought Ali was a blowhard and a braggart, and I think he set the tone for so many black athletes to come, to be excessively egotistical, to bragging constantly, all about showmanship instead of
Yeah.
getting your job done. But the idea that he came to prominence, the first fight, where Sonny Liston didn't answer the bell, that was a little questionable. But the second fight, the invisible punch in the first round, well, they call it the invisible punch. I'm not
Right.
calling it that.
Yeah.
Everybody, that's how ridiculous it was. And Sonny Liston he was very much like George Foreman later with the rope-a-dope, which is another nonsense fight. But this guy Liston, I thought could annihilate. I was too little, but I mean, I would assume he should have been able to annihilate then Cassius Clay. But my theory is that it took, I don't know how many years. I think it was 38 or something, and he had a very sad life and he was troubled. But I don't think it's beyond the realm of consideration that maybe he was gonna talk and just suddenly say, I threw that fight with Ali. I
Well,
took a dive,
there were people. My friend, his name is Michael Ayres, by the way, who's been writing about this, believes he was murdered. I was a teenager. I was an I was a Cassius Clay fan as a kid,
Sure.
and as a kid, we followed boxing. I mean, I was at that
Yeah, it was
time
big. Yeah.
West
Yes.
America. That was it was boxing and baseball really when it came down to.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
And so my friends and I listened to the Ali Liston fight because it wasn't televised, and it was at the time it was still Cassius Clay, and my fear was that Liston would literally kill him in the ring,
Mhm.
because
Yes.
Liston was that fearsome, right?
Yes. It was. Yep.
Uh, I was the most natural, like a God-made machine designed to inflict punishment. He was almost
Yeah.
biblical in his
Yeah.
capabilities.
hmm
But everything from that moment on was suspect.
Oh,
He
it was,
was
and yeah, Ali. I mean, I remember watching some of his fights. I think it was George Chuvalo was one. I don't, but one of these fights, I was watching the fight, and and I'm looking at it, in my mind, I'm thinking Ali is losing every round,
right,
because he's just dancing, and you're not supposed to get points for that, but they
right.
gave him points for that, and I'm thinking, what the hell, what is this? To me, his entire career was a fraud. I think he was there for social purposes, and he unfortunately transformed the culture. So I commend you for writing that. I didn't know you've written a lot more books than I thought. I know you had one about that, but I'm going to have that. I'm going to talk about things in the sports book that have been completely forgotten. I don't know how much of a sports fan you were, but somebody was talking about basketball in the chat, and yes,
Oh,
the
I
NBA's
know
been.
my sports. Let
Yeah,
me give you a question, Don. I mean, I've
sure.
watched in the course of writing my book, because I wrote it. It focused on Ali, but it was really about the history of professional boxing, especially the narratives that were spun out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've watched every heavyweight championship fight in the 20th century on film or on video. Uh, and if I were boxing, I'd be a heavyweight, not a big heavyweight, but 6 foot, 210, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who would I least like to fight? Of all the fight people who fought, who would I be most frightened to get in the ring against? I could tell you,
Rocky Marciano.
Mike Tyson.
Well, Mike Tyson. Yeah, Mike Tyson would be in his prime, not now, but yeah,
Oh
yeah,
no, in his
exactly.
prime,
Yeah,
I would not have gotten. I'd get in the ring with Ali. I would probably want to get in the ring
yeah,
with Sonny Liston, and I'd
yeah,
have gotten in the
yeah.
ring with Rocky Marciano. But who is a great fighter, by the way, retired undefeated.
Yes,
Uh,
the only one. Yeah, that's why
but
I'm going to talk.
Mike
Yeah.
Tyson, that first 30 seconds, as he says, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And
Yes. Oh, yeah. He's
yeah,
fascinating. I was a big Trump supporter.
I'm just the ferocity, the anger, the
Oh, yeah.
bottled up rage that just exploded into the ring. Uh,
Oh, absolutely.
and Ali didn't have that. Ali grew up in a nice home. He wasn't an angry person.
Right.
Um,
No,
and even
apparently
Sonny
Ali
Liston
was
had that kind of anger, but it bottled up the way Mike
Ali was
Tyson.
yeah, Ali was nice to fans and everything, and he treated them well. So but he just had it could be very funny. As a teenager, I used to laugh when he'd be on TV and everything. His ridiculous
Yeah,
poems, and he was hilarious. Uh, but he just had, he gave boxing had always been shady. You always had your movies and stuff talking
right.
about the mob being involved and people taking dives. And I think if Sonny Liston didn't take a dive, I don't know that anybody ever has. And that,
I'm with you on that one. I agree with you on that one.
yeah. So if he took a dive, who benefited from it? And the idea the greatest boxer ever, according to them, and the guy that was the star of the 60s and 70s, if you come into prominence that way, then that to me that discredits everything about you and it makes you at least a real reporter should examine. Okay, and then look at your other fights. Well, how many fights do we know the fights he really lost, like to Ken Norton and Ernie Shavers and all these people that later he was getting beat all the time and they just
He
kept
was a
giving him
punching bag.
decisions.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
just.
and
Uh,
they just kept giving him decisions. But so yeah, my book's going to be a lot about that. But one I don't know if you remember this, but and I don't know how many sports fans we have in the chat. I don't want to talk about this too much, but you remember a guy named Luke Whitty, college
yeah,
basketball player? Yeah, Luke
sure.
Whitty he was considered the white Lou Alcindor, which was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's name at that time. This guy was a
Right.
superstar, and he was viciously assaulted on the court. I think he was a sophomore, maybe a junior, but he was a superstar, and he was violently attacked by the all-black Minnesota University of Middle. Bill Musselman was the first coach to employ an all-black squad.
That
I
was
mean, they just
Michael Thompson's team.
yeah,
Was it
and
Michael
and
Thompson?
and well, I don't know if Michael did, but Dave Winfield
Oh,
was
Dave
on that
Winfield.
team.
Right, Dave
Dave
Winfield. Right.
Winfield, yeah, and so
Yeah.
and that's been erased from his record. I had
Yeah.
to find that out later. My friend told me, and I looked it up and said, "Wow, that's never mentioned ever when he became a
You're
big,
right. That's
major league
never
player."
mentioned. Yeah, I
No,
just
and
I forgot it.
but
And
they
I follow
they
Big Ten basketball too. So
they
uh,
beat him up so bad. They broke his
yeah,
jaw, and I think, and bled him, and he was never the same player after that. They intimidated
yeah.
him so bad, and
Same thing happened
so
to Rudy Tomjanovich. You remember that one?
yes, yes, he was sucker punched by Kermit Washington. I think it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
again, and
Hey,
Tom Janovich he became a coach later, but he was never the same player. And
yeah.
Tom Janovich was
Hey,
a
Don, I could talk to you for hours here, but
star.
I have to go to dinner, so I'm gonna have to cut out here. But we'll have to do just a sports show sometime.
Gotcha, and I appreciate you giving us the time.
And good luck.
Well,
You
well,
do a
yeah,
good job, and
Jack,
keep
and,
your
and,
audience
and
honest. Okay.
well, I'll do
Last thing,
that. So anything
Ashley.
you want to promote, give out any links or anything you want to promote.
There we go. Ashley, there we go. The
Okay, I see
Untold
that.
Story of the Women of January 6th. It's a great read. You can't understand January 6th without it. So
Fantastic, Jack. Well, I
until,
really appreciate you joining us. Go have your dinner, and we'll talk again some point.
Okay, super. Take care, Don. Bye-bye.
Take care, Jack. Thank you, sir. Okay, Jack Cashill, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so we have a little over half an hour. So lots of people in the chat here, and Duke Valentina. First of all, you want me to talk about Ireland again? I don't know. That really had nothing to do with what we were talking about. I don't know which. I mean, obviously if you read me, you know that I'm very much against migrants, flooding white countries, and so obviously I think it's horrible what's going on there. But perhaps you can give us more information there. There was, I think there was a woman, Nancy, in here. I want to get to the Nancy Henderson. Yes, Nancy Henderson said she heard my name mentioned on an X space last night with Judith Ferrybeck. Yeah, people keep trying to get me to go on that X space, and I'm just never available for that. Um, Oswald's girlfriend from New Orleans, so searched for you and bought 3 of your books. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciated that. I don't know who was talking. Was Judith talking about me? Judith kind of knows me. Um, I'm kind of a I'm kind of an agnostic there too. Obviously not an agnostic in real life, but I'm Trump agnostic, a Judith Berry Baker agnostic. I think I do know of her obviously because her claims. I think her story is at least mostly true because I think it's shown that she worked for the Riley Coffee Company. Judith Berry Baker. Lee Harvey Oswald worked for a place called Riley Coffee Company in New Orleans, and it was. A very strange place. The Riley that ran it apparently had some intelligence connections, and when Jim Garrison went to conduct his investigation in 1967 when he started, they went to Riley Coffee Company and they wanted to talk to some employees there who remembered Lee Harvey Oswald. It had only been 5 years, and they found to their amazement that there was nobody there left there that had worked with him. But what's more incredible was that they all had gone to the same place. They all left Riley Coffee Company to work for NASA. Now, if you know of any correlation between NASA and coffee, I don't know what it would be. And Duke Valentino says, oh, Robin Lee says she met Ali years ago. He's eating a huge platter of cheeseburgers. He stopped eating Tejan. Yeah, I mean, look, the guy, all anecdote, and I admire him going to jail, not going to the Vietnam War. I think that was admirable during the peak of his career. I just think his career was fraudulent, and for the reasons I said, I think he was a great dancer, in terms that he could flick that jab out, but he just, he won a lot of fixed fights, starting with the Sonny Liston fight, and I think they may have killed Sonny Liston because he was going to talk about it. I don't know for sure that. Oh, Karen Carver says his grandfather died of a heart attack watching the Floyd Patterson fight in 1959. Wow, I did not know that. That's like Shemp Howard of the Three Stooges dropped dead after a night at the fights. I think I heard, probably in New York City. I'm looking at these, see what these comments I had since Duke Valentin says he was attacked by Africans. Duke, well, I'm sorry. Obviously, you have a real reason to talk about that. I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe give us the details on what happened. You were attacked by Africans. That's terrible. But and Kian Akuma said he was attacked by an African a few years ago. Black eye, broken glass sucker. And the sucker punch thing is, again, it's a sore spot with me because the entire knockout game, and I wrote a section on that in Bullyocracy. Probably one of the many reasons it didn't get the play it should have because, again, the knockout game is what it is. It's a game. It's invented by urban youths, black youths. And a lot of times it involves attacking whites, sometimes blacks, but it's just a ridiculous, violent, brainless game that where you just go up and literally, like, you'll see an old white lady on the street as if you can't punch her front on. I mean, you have to sucker punch her too, but they sucker punch everybody. It's part of the ghetto culture. It just is. I'm sorry to hear that, Ken. Sorry to hear that, Duke. Uh, Twisted Pistol, it says Garrison said Averell Harriman was responsible for JFK's death. What's your take on that? Well, that's what John Barber told me. That's his. I certainly defer to Garrison. He investigated more than almost everybody. That certainly makes sense to me. Harriman was a blue blood, and he certainly interfered in JFK's attempts to try to disengage in Vietnam. Okay, I don't know, Ken. What's he talking? Okay, NASA, not a space agency. When was the first time you came across Mossad connection to JFK death? Twisted Pistol says. That would be through Michael Collins Piper's book Final Judgment. Michael was a great reporter for the Spotlight back in the day, and the Spotlight became the American Free Press, which I write for now. I had just started reaching out to Michael when I, started getting an internet presence, and we had talked a few times. I didn't have a show yet, or I definitely would have had him on. I tried to get him to come back on the JFK forums because I thought he was being treated unfairly there. He was the first one to talk about the Israeli connection, and he the community now, the research community such it is, will talk about it, but they never give him credit because they smeared him as anti-Semitic and everything, and they wouldn't let him, they wouldn't let him make him feel welcome on the forum. So he wouldn't come because he was tired of arguing with them. And he died very young of an apparently real heart problem, but he was younger than me, and I felt really bad about that. But he was uh, he was an honest reporter. Duke says, "Do you think the Kennedys are part of the elite system?" Well, they all are, except for RFK Jr. now, apparently. So they're. I think the record shows that enough Kennedys have been killed over the course of time where they are some kind of enemies to the elite. Unless you're gonna go the Miles Mathis route and think everything's fake, then you really can't really analyze anything. They're all actors, which to some degree I think they could be. There's certainly the what you saw today in the White House, that certainly had a lot of theatrical elements of it. It was damn good entertainment. I'll give them that. I say whoever's writing the script for Trump 2.0 is doing a much better job than they did in the first term. I think. Uh, Duke Valentino says his sister was a victim of the knockout game. I'm sorry to hear this. So obviously, you have a real reason to feel the way you do, Duke, because if you and your sister both were, and that'll make you. That'll make you feel a certain way, won't it? If you when you experience these things yourself. Um, Twisted Pistol is sometimes questions of Mossad connection because one of the first, well, all of the JFK researchers, think what you want of it, but most of the prominent JFK researchers were Jewish. Again, it is what it is. My hero Mark Lane, and another one of my heroes Harold Weisberg, and Sylvia Meagher was Jewish. David Lifton was Jewish. Uh, yeah, most of the original ones were. There's no question about it. And but they did great work. Were they part of it? I don't know. When I read Illuminatus, which had great influence, it really influenced my fiction. It influenced my novel, The Unreals. The Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson. Robert Anton Wilson later wrote a series of books about the Illuminati, Cosmic Trigger, Final Secret of the Illuminati, and several books like that. And he was friends with Timothy Leary, which I'm very dubious of him, by the way, not just because of that, but um, in in Illuminati, they basically had Mark Lane as being, I think he was in charge of chaos. They had like 5 people or something that were running things for the Illuminati. Mark Lane was one of them. So, I mean, I still love the book, but come on. Mark Lane was my mentor, my hero. I don't think he was an Illuminati agent, but he was Jewish. And, so was Harold Weisberg, who I also met and had dinner with out there. They were enemies too. But, so Nancy, if you're out there, you can jump in and, again, I don't know if I've answered these questions. There are a lot of questions here that I didn't want to answer while I was talking to Jack. But Twisted Pistol said they did great work. That's why I questioned if Assad was actually involved. Well, it could be, again, if you look at it, that those original researchers didn't know. I mean, I don't think any of us knew that JFK was, and Michael Collins Piper, and I don't know where he found that out. I don't remember if he gets Freedom of Information Act or something, but where he found out that JFK was involved in this behind the scenes going back and forth with David Ben Gurion during the months leading up to the assassination about nuclear weapons being developed by Israel, and JFK did not want them to have a nuclear weapons program. Collins Piper was the first one to publicize that, so they might not have known that. I didn't know it, so it's and they're all dead. So I don't know. I think Lane probably, and well, I know Lane was receptive to it because Mark Lane lived long enough. Michael Collins Piper, I'm sure he knew him because Michael Collins Piper wrote for the Spotlight, and Lane was Liberty Lobby's attorney. And so actually, Mark Lane was best friends in the last several years of his life with the guy that headed up. And God, I can't believe I'm drawing so many blanks lately on names, but the head of Liberty Lobby, I can't believe I can't drawing it a blank. I'll come up with it, but the guy who was running it for the last several years and was considered a vicious anti-Semite, of course, because had tried Liberty Lobby. Him and Mark Lane became best friends. And in fact, one time when I called I used to call the Spotlight as a young guy, and one of the times I called, Mark Lane answered the phone. So I guess they didn't have a receptionist or something. And Mark, it just taints his legacy. Maybe that they're. Well, I think that if you look at, I don't know that Lane wrote about the Mossad later, but I'm sure he knew about it because again, he probably was in communication. Apparently, he was at their office. He answered the phone one time when I called, and he was involved. He handled them. I think their legal work in two or three cases, high-profile cases against Weymouth Buckley, Jack Anderson. Not sure anybody else. Um, Nancy Henderson said she read my Substack article today. I'm in complete agreement with your work. Well, that's wonderful to hear, Nancy, and I can't tell you how much it means to me to hear that you bought three of my books and you're in complete agreement with my worldview. That's why I do this, and I love to, and I hear from people like you far more often probably than I deserve. So it's great. And Chris Graves points out, yeah, Lane was at Jonestown. Yeah, and Mark again, he was Jim Jones's attorney, and a lot of times people say, well, how did he survive that? You know, he must be one of them, and he's the CIA. But everybody in the jail, all those critics. I mean, Harold Weisberg, who I loved, was a chicken farmer later, and lived in Frederick, Maryland. I went to his house and everything. Nothing special about him, but he had been an OSS officer, and OSS was the forerunner to the CIA. So yeah, you look at the backgrounds of these people, and certainly you can find things. And again, we always must be remembering that what Lenin said. Lenin said, the best way to defeat the opposition is to lead them. So if you want to control the critics of something, then it would be best for you to co-opt them. And certainly, I think they have had people that they co-opted. I hope not. Certainly would be. I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second. It wouldn't be Mark Lane or anyways like that. Nancy says your direct message is not activated X. It's done instead. I get direct messages all the time. Nancy, have you started following me there? If you follow me, and then I'll follow you back. And I think that's why. Probably otherwise, you certainly should be able to send me a message. If not, my email is open to everybody. I hear from my email is author as in writer AUTHOR author Jeffries at gmail.com. So you can email me there. But I'll follow you if you follow me there. Follow me and I'll follow you back. And should be I don't have any. One of the things I find most, and I see it from people who are no more famous than I am. They're nobodies. And these might have a small following, but and I see these people saying, no DMs, please. No direct. That just seems so pretentious. It's like, who the hell are you? Nobody's heard of you. And so no, I would never do that. Anybody's, well, I like getting messages from everybody. Thank you, Nancy. So I'll follow you back after the show, and yeah, we'll see. Uh, is Billy Ray going to be on the show tomorrow? Well, I hope so. I don't know. I mean, I guess that should be entertaining. I guess maybe not as entertaining the White House there, but I mean, with what's happening so far, again, I can't. The only thing I can criticize is, yeah, is this all a show? And maybe it is. It seems too good to be true. But understand what I'm seeing in terms of disclosure, and a lot of the things that Trump is doing on the surface are things that I've been expecting somebody to do for a long time. So, why is he doing it? I don't know. Yeah, there probably is. Maybe there's an ulterior motive. Um, Twisted Pistol says, are you a fan of Oliver Stone? Is he controlled by the Corey Hughes? Yes, Corey Hughes was on this show. Might have been when I was, I think it was when I was on TFR years ago. Now he's getting a big following, I think. But I think John Barber loved him. He's the one that recommended me to him. All I remember about Corey is that I can't get past the fact he thinks Jack Valente. If I'm right, if I'm wrong, I apologize for it. But if I understand him correctly, he thinks Jack Valente was a shooter, one of the shooters in JFK. And I'm sorry, Jack Valente was LBJ's stooge, and later became head of the Motion Picture Association for years in Hollywood, and one of the defenders of LBJ's tainted legacy, which is indefensible. I just like I've had guys on the show that who I like, but thinks that George H.W. Bush was a shooter in the records building, and I just don't think you would pick that. Just like I don't think William Greer, the driver. Yes, I think he was a conspirator because he stopped the car and made it happen, but I don't think he was a shooter. Corey pushes the Jews, did it never? Well, who doesn't, Twist? I mean, everybody pushes the Jews. As Chris Buchan disappeared, I'm sure he'll tell us that. But I mean, and that's essentially kind of what Michael Collins Piper was saying. I mean, I don't think Israel was the main impetus behind the assassination. I'm sorry, but I think they could have been involved, and they had a motive for wanting him dead. But I think that the national security apparatus, I think the Pentagon and the CIA, I think those people played the most prominent role. Duke, you again, just I gave you my email address again. Send me. I don't have time to do it, and I'm sure I have sources for what you're talking about. I need to look at the book. Give me that page number and an email, and whether it's hardback or paperback, and I'll look it up. And I'm trying to figure out where I got that from. Now it's possible my source for that might have been the Spotlight because especially for hidden history, a lot of that stuff was deep hidden stuff, and the only source for some of that material was the Spotlight. So that may be a problem. A lot of people think that's incredible. I'm sorry, they were the only people reporting it. And so Duke, I don't know if that answered your question. Oh, Tav, I recognize Tav. Tav, I believe, is the one who keeps telling me about the Judith Very Baker's spaces. Tav, maybe you can elaborate on what Nancy heard. Uh, Nancy says she's 78. Well, it's bless you. Ever see the full truth exposed about the Kennedy assassination? I don't know. And well, again, we'll see the fact that we have somebody in Congress who, yes, I know she's young and she's, probably doesn't know anything, but, she's certainly no expert. I wish she'd call me up. I could help her out with some expertise in the area. But again, and maybe that's all smoke free too. And if they come out with something in the JFK assassination through her investigation, and they say the mafia did it or some, limited hangout thing, and of course I'll be the first one uh, to talk about it. Yeah, I would be shocked if they came out and said, yeah, General Curtis LeMay and Alan Dulles and Avril Harriman and J. Edgar Hoover and Lyndon Johnson and maybe the Mossad and maybe the CIA is an institution. Maybe that all these powerful forces, Permindex and the International Assassination Bureau that apparently existed that Jim Garrison was looking into, Major Louis Bloomfield and people like that. There was if they started then yeah, I'd be shocked. I mean, I don't know what it would be, but that would obviously take some balls, and whether it would be allowed, I don't know. But at least they're talking about it, so we'll see what happens. Because that's where I got my start, was lobbying Congress for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and I was very disillusioned with that. But at the time, I had stars in my eyes, and I thought, the Democrats are the good guys. They're gonna show us. Um, yeah, Chris Gray says he believes Jack was a shooter. I can't, I can't take it seriously that, I mean, Jack Valente, why would Jack Valente have been a shooter? That's just ridiculous. I mean, you hire out people like that. You wouldn't have a presidential assistant do that. That makes this like you wouldn't have George H.W. Bush do it. But again, I'm not a conspirator, so what do I know? Um, Nothing's impossible. Karen says she doesn't see Nancy in the chat. I don't either, so I worry I don't see some of you. Some of the messages aren't showing up. I don't know. Thank you, Robin. Robin, you are so sweet. You really are. I really appreciate you. I'm never pretentious. Well, I don't think I could be pretentious. I have lots of flaws, lots of faults, but I'm an open book. too much of an open book for my own good, probably. People think I give out too much information, but I don't. Like I was a blue collar worker for 15 years, and then I worked in IT and the kind of the lower levels for a long time, and I sold real estate. You know, I never thought I was that successful. I lived a good life. I've been lucky that I got in a nice home in the nice neighborhood, but I always said I probably made less money than anybody in this neighborhood. I come from the neighborhood where Colin Powell once lived, and Mia Hamm, the soccer star. So I was just lucky, I think. But so I couldn't be pretentious because and I hate when I hear, and I just something that strikes me about that on when somebody gets a little bit of, and that's the problem I have with our community is that the uh, the people that have found the secret that I don't know what the secret is to getting hundreds of thousands or millions of followers on these platforms. I don't know how you do that. I can't seem to do it. Part of it's the shadow man, certainly, but and maybe if I got that many, I would feel pretentious too. I hope I wouldn't. But I mean, nobody knows who they are. I mean, there'll be some babe that comes up that says, Patriot Mom or something as a title, and she's got like 1 million followers. I don't know who the hell she is or why she's famous, but instantly she knows she's famous and she doesn't accept direct messages or whatever. And I'm just using that name. That's not a real name. But I just think people, you attract more flies with sugar than vinegar. At least that's my philosophy. I don't know how many flies I've attracted, but I just. Oh, Chris Gray says Judith was just on Piers Morgan. Yeah, everybody's getting on Piers Morgan. Will I be next? I don't know. Really, Judith is, again, she's. I got to give her credit. She's Oliver Stone loves her now. And talked her up. She's taken over the research community, and she's better than a lot of the researchers. I can say that. But I think if she's guilty of anything, she's guilty of exaggerating her, maybe her role. And that has happened to a lot of witnesses, and that's human nature. People, especially when you develop an audience, you have people telling you you're great all the time. Maybe you begin to believe it yourself, and you want to give them something. So that's all I can speculate. I don't know, but she's never done anything to me. But again, I don't really know her, and so she knows me of me. It is entertaining, Karen. There's no question about. Oh, Kian met James Howard Kunstler. James Howard Kunstler had interviewed me, and I got to tell you, I get more Substack subscribers from his Substack. I mean, whenever I look, 90% of the time it's coming from his Substack. So I can't say, although he did quibble with me about something I posted once, and I think it was about Israel. I don't know, but I can't say, I'm sorry to hear that. And I don't know why he would be that way. Our interview went well, I think, but. So sorry, I always, I don't know why anybody would. To me, anybody that tells me, I mean, you're talking about a guy who, I lived a long time without having any fans or anybody thinking I never have any fans or somebody telling me, when people first started telling me, big fan, it's like, what? What are you talking about? So it takes a while to get used to it. I could never get a swelled head because again, I lived, most of my life as just a nobody. Not that I'm much more than a nobody now, but the fact that people know who I am, and my definition of fame, I quoted often on Jeff Rense's show and others, and I define fame as when any appreciable number of people know who you are that you don't know. Now, what appreciable means, I don't know. But in my case, it's thousands at least. I mean, my book Hidden History has sold over 30,000 copies, so those people know who I am. So I think that it's a low level of fame. But I don't think of myself as famous, and I've never had anybody accost me in public yet. So maybe I'll find somebody that has seen my show or something. Say, are you Don Jeffries? That would be. I can't imagine I'd be upset about it. But again, this is all new to me, so it's very strange. Duke Valentina says, "Do you think Israel?" No, I just said I don't think Israel. They may have been involved, and they had a reason to want him dead, but I don't. I don't. I don't think they were the main. Just like I don't think LBJ was. I don't think he had the. I think these things happen above them, but he certainly wanted it. Yeah. Yeah, I see your DMs, Tom. It's just usually I see them too late, but and I got to tell you, I used to do spaces. I haven't done them for a while, and the first several spaces I did were pretty successful. It looked like it was presence was growing, and then again something happened. This was before Elon took over the shadow ban, and I just I just couldn't get excited when it said like 20 people watching or something, and it just I just so I kind of got depressed about it, and I didn't do it for a while. So I don't know. Maybe I just I'm reluctant maybe to jump back in there. I'd like to do it in the spaces myself at some point, but again, it's kind of like when you're at a book signing and nobody shows up. Although most of the time I had pretty good response to my book signings, but a couple times that when you're sitting there at a table and people walk by and just kind of maybe they pick up your book and look at it and put it down, and, or they ask you, they talk to you for 10 minutes and then don't buy your book. I mean, it's kind of like I guess being at a party and there's nobody to talk to or something. So it gets I don't know I don't know how to explain it. Um, Tim the Hat. Oh, Tim Pool. Chemical says big, but well, and again, I don't, and maybe Tim Pool will have me on the show. I doubt that seriously, but he's one of the people that I don't. There's so many that, and he's not the worst, but there are people that don't seem to have charisma. They don't seem to be funny. They don't seem to be entertaining, and they got a couple million people following them. I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, there are people out there that like the Hodge twins I discovered through my son. Man, they are hilarious. They're black guys, but they're just and they've got millions of followers. But I understand why, because they're really funny, and they show ridiculous videos of everyday people doing stupid stuff, and sometimes political stuff. Very funny stuff. But most of the people, you know, and most of the people some of the ones that have big followings, I understand. Tucker Carlson, for instance, is very good at what he does, regardless of what if he's compromised or not. He's very smooth, and he can be entertaining. He's very listenable too. But some of these people, Tim Pool would be one of those ones. I don't find him that personable. There's another guy. I can't think of the guy's name. But he's way worse than Tim Pool. I can't think of the guy's name, but sometimes it amazes me. I look and I say, how did they get a million followers? Could I talk about the fake moon landing? Well, we're running out of time, but yeah, Duke, I believe it was fake, and I would say that I would urge anyone who's on the fence about that, as I was, I would urge you to go to uh, the late great Dave McGowan's Center for Informed America website. You can still find just search for Wagging the Moon Doggy. It'll take you off the fence. I mean, there's no question. I mean, just the fact that they tell you that they lost the technology. How do you lost the technology? And they claim we can't go there today, but we could go there then with the computer power of a you know a handheld calculator. No, I mean I don't believe it for a second. And that's the kind of thing that really I think triggered the flat Earth movement and things like that. Is because when you start realizing NASA is fake. It just is. And I'd love to see Doge. Just imagine if they audited NASA and found evidence of that. But Christ, she's humble now and never arrogant. Well, I don't know that she ever was. I think the criticism were people that have known her. They claim she changed her story or so. I don't know. I really don't know. And like I said, she's never been anything nasty or not to me. But I mean, she knows who I am, and I think she thanked me a couple times when I defended her years ago on a forum. But Nancy says send me an invite next time she's in X space that I. Oh, cool. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to be a guest on Spaces again because that's what I was before. I don't know how to run these things. I'm lucky if I can even get into the Spaces, but I liked it. And then people, I feel the question, especially the first few times, it was great because I had a lot of people and a lot of more people discovered me through there, and I certainly can talk about any of my books or Substack or anything. Like that. Brad Kiefer, you're very nice. He's always, I love hearing you always have kind words to say. No such thing as luck. Well, there is a lot of luck, and I am blessed too, though. Thank you very much. Twisted Pistol says Vivek knows who Don is. Well, I don't know. My book Hidden History was on the bookshelf behind him when he was interviewed by Alex Jones, so he should, but I don't know. I need an agent. I do. Well, Robin, I do. You know, the thing is, I think I'm the only person in the history of the world, oh, not the history of the world, but I've had 10 books published and I had a literary agent once for a week and she was very big. And it's too much. I don't want to open up this. It's too detailed, but for a while I was investigating the Natalie Holloway death with these two very interesting characters that I still keep in contact with. And they wanted me to write their book and they had been to Aruba several times. They knew Jorn van der Sloot. They knew his family. They knew Natalie Holloway's mother. They knew all these people, and they had a fascinating theory. I mean, simply put, I don't think Jordan van der Sloot killed her or the woman in Peru either. So, and I've written a lot of that book. It's well researched, but I had the agent for a week, and she was one of the biggest agents, the Martin McBride Literary Agency. She represented Mike Huckabee and a lot of the big shots. So I was, feeling great. And this is cool. She's going to look at my fiction and everything. And a week later, she canceled the contract with us because of the murder in Peru. And I tried to talk her. I said, "Look, I've got, he didn't do it, but she got out of the business. She's still my friend on Facebook, but she's just not into it." So, um, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. A very kind and intelligent person. Well, I tried. I don't. I mean, I think I had a pretty thick skin, and I really, I really don't get, much negative feedback, which is kind of amazing. Other than people I know, you know, Facebook reminds me of that because that shadow ban is eased a little bit there. So when I see people's names I know commenting, I know 99% of the time it's going to be negative, is what it is. Um, Kenny Finn Power says got stuck listening on another stream. Will this play back later, American? We'll play America Unplugged tomorrow. Yes, sir. As far as I know, unless it's canceled. I don't think so. Well, thanks, Robin. Well, Hidden History sold over 30,000, I think, by now. But I can tell you, I haven't made any money on it. Don't get me started on the publishers. That's another thing. I understand where. I mean, I've had I think 5, 6 different publishers now, and whenever I've got a royalty check, I have never once been pleasantly surprised in what 11 years. Never once been pleasantly surprised. It's always a disappointment, and it's impossible to fight them because I don't have any idea how many books it sold. Nothing I can fight it on. I'm relying on what they tell me, and it's very frustrating. Um, Tim Pool, okay, so Kenny, lots of people don't like Tim Pool. Somebody likes him. Um, Well, that's fantastic, Nancy. Yeah, I certainly jump in there. Send me an invitation. Yeah, that sounds it. Lex Friedman, that's it. Thank you, Twisted Pistol. Lex Friedman, he is the worst. I mean, you talk about you want a cure for insomnia, turn that guy on, and he gets the biggest guests in the world. It's like, what the? I mean, this guy is nothing. He's so boring, and I don't even know if he knows anything. He's so uninteresting. Um, Duke Valentina says, "Do you think Dave Allen was whacked?" Well, his death was very curious. Let's say that. We just started reaching out to each other. I had his brother Craig on my old show on TFR. We did a tribute show to him. Yeah, and he died on November 22nd too, which was even more cosmically bizarre. But yeah, I'm very suspicious about that. Again, I can't prove anything. I'm suspicious, especially with what he was writing about. Chris definitely thinks he was, Chris Graves. Um, I'm looking to see here. You're a big guest this Monday on X. Well, and X is the problem with Monday is I do Jeff Rentz's show at 9 p.m. So that's kind of difficult. Mondays or maybe another day. I'd certainly like to be. He made like $20 key in self-publishing. Well, I made a little more than that, but let me tell you, it's less than I make way more on Substack and writing for American Free Press than I do. Yes, Karen. Dave had a great sense of humor, and I'm always honored. A lot of people have compared him to me over the years, and so I think I'm very flattered by that. Uh, um, Thanks, Kenny. But we'll see. I mean, I assume it's going to be on tomorrow. We'll see. Oh, RB Ham, my friend from Canada. Good to see you here, brother. He said Lex Friedman is Masadi, let it slip during 10. Well, he's got to be, somebody's got to be propping the guy up because, I mean, this guy is, You know, he makes Rita Rudner, if you remember the old comedians, he makes her look like Mrs. Excitement. I mean, I never understood her, but okay. Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. And book Understood the Ghost Town. It is. That's it's. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, I've talked about Natalie Holloway before. I'll talk about it again sometimes. Duke says, "Do I have another book on the way?" Yes, I'm working on my book about sports, and I'll be talking more about that in the way. And I've had several people send me titles. Still working on what that's going to be. Just really easing into that. Thanks to the age of retirement. Well, you know what I could use in the meantime, and I'll tell you guys this, and I'll be tweeting up it. I can again, I can't afford to pay anybody, but lots of people ask me to help all the time. They want to be involved, and certainly Chris Graves and Peter Seacotch have done so much research for me over the years, and other people have helped as well. But if somebody would step up and just help me out, like how to promote myself better. I mean, I need to be more sophisticated on social media, know how to do this stuff better, and I know there are ways to get more followers on Twitter and things like that. So anybody wants to help me with that, message me on Twitter or you can email me. I'd love to hear from you. But great to see a lot of people watching, and a lot of people in the chat. So great participation, guys. I love this. I love seeing so many people out there. I love your questions, and I appreciate that. So, but it looks like I'm past my time. I got to get. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Interesting times. Keep keep watching this, guys, as they say. And these are interesting times we live in, if nothing else. So again, I thank everybody for listening to I Protest. We'll talk to you next week. In the meantime, follow me on Substack, Donald Jeffries at Substack.com. It's I Protest, just like this show. Follow me on Twitter at Don Jeffries. We'll talk to you next week at 5 p.m. the same time. Thanks for listening to I Protest.